Okay, students, today we're going to talk about rhetorical appeals. You might also see them as rhetorical strategies. These are things that were brought out by Aristotle in the 3rd century BC, where he was trying to talk to his students about ways they can persuade people to think, believe, or do something. So that's what he called rhetoric, is the art of persuasive writing or speaking, and he did coin that term, rhetoric. So you should have seen this before at the beginning of the class. There's a rhetorical triangle that he set up that where he said there's a relationship between the writer or the speaker, the message they want to convey, and the audience that they're trying to convey it to. So this is something I'm going to give you terminology for today, but you see it everywhere. So trying to pick a movie or scrolling through Instagram, there's I'll go to this, watching TED Talks in your classes or reading articles, just seeing advertisements around. All of them are trying to get you to think, believe, or do something, and they're all using strategies of rhetoric. So what are those? Those are there's 4 specific kinds. We're going to mostly talk about 3. So of the modes of persuasion furnished by the spoken word, there are 3 kinds. The first kind depends on the personal character of the speaker, ethos. The second on putting the audience into a certain frame of mind, and the third on the proof or apparent proof. Those are the 3 things we're going to be looking at. Is the speaker credible? Have they put their speaker or their reader into a certain frame of mind so they can receive their message? And is there apparent proof, logical, and is it persuasive? There is a third kind called kairos. I'm not going to go into it much today, and it's not something I want you to think about in your paper, but that's referring to the timeliness of the speech. So that would be 2 things. One, if you're using terminology that is in the current trend of thinking, so things like woke or me too. The other would be if it's in response to another event that happened. So the texts and things that came out after the untimely death of George Floyd that talked about discrimination and police reform, those were all definitely using kairos. They were in response to a text where, obviously we should have been thinking about it already, but that got it more, discrimination more in the public frame of mind. Okay, so the 3 I do want you to think about here are logos, ethos, and pathos. So we're going to start with logos. So logos is, I have my detective monk here because I really want you to think about logos as proving your point in a court of law, like the things you would bring there. So you would have logical reasoning, that would be logos. You would have facts, statistics, and numbers, that would be logos. You would also have, this one I think is kind of throw students off, but you would, in logos, you can also have stories that prove a point. So things like Aesop's fables or Anansi tales, where there's a moral of the story. The purpose of that story is to, show some sort of truth, and that would be an appeal to reasoning. Let's go to an example. So an example would be back in 2003, the UK government carried out a survey. It was a survey that measured levels of numeracy in the population, and they were shocked to find out that for every 100 working age adults in the country, 47 of them lacked level 1 numeracy skills. So this is pretty persuasive in making the reader think, numeracy skills are definitely not as high as I would have thought, 47 out of 100, right? And the way they're helping prove that point is that they are presenting a statistic. And there's also a fact that there was this survey that came out, right? So that's a pretty powerful form of persuasion. Pathos is the next one. We'll talk about it. Sometimes you hear it say pathos. Somebody can tell me what they think it really is, but I'm going to call it pathos. This is any time that you have an appeal to emotion, and that's the way you're trying to persuade your reader about something. So this is any type of emotion: love, anger, hope, humor. And the idea, again, as Aristotle said, is to put your reader in the right frame of mind, whatever that frame of mind is that you want them to be in. So you mostly see this in 2 ways. One is vocabulary choices, and the second is through stories. I know that's confusing because you can have stories in logos too, but these are stories that make you want to react in some way, right? Whether that's cry because you feel so bad for somebody, or, get angry because of this terrible situation someone's in. A story that the primary purpose is to get you to feel an emotion, that is pathos. So this one I have an excerpt from I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. This is more using vocabulary words and kind of the way she set this up to make her reader feel an emotion. And this one definitely is anger. If growing up is painful for the Southern black girl, being aware of her displacement is the rest on the razor that threatens the throat. It is an unnecessary insult. So all those vocabulary choices she's chosen there, unnecessary insult, rest on the razor, even displacement, those all make you feel angry for her, right? And that would be an example of trying to get your reader in the right frame of mind to listen to your message. So the last one we're going to talk about is ethos, and this is how you establish your own credibility. And you can do these through a couple of different ways. The first is to establish your credibility on the shoulders of other people. So that would be based on my research. So when you have thoughts from other people, scholarly journals and things in your writing, that shows that you are aware of the issues because you've done some research. If you're bringing other people in who are really well known, so that one doesn't count, but like people like, Abraham Lincoln said this, for example, or Mahatma Gandhi said this. Like, those are people that are really well known, so that helps to establish your credibility because people think, if Mahatma Gandhi thought that, then clearly he's credible, so this person must be credible as well. If you have some sort of credential that ups your credibility, then, and it has to do with your topic, you can bring that up. So if you have experience with, maybe you've kept an aquarium tank for 10 years and you're going to talk about how to take care of an aquarium, a fish tank. So that would be your experience you could talk about. If you have some sort of title, like as a doctor, I can tell you this. So it has to have something to do with your what your text is about. So for example, if I was writing something, I could say, as a professor of writing, I see student papers, blah, 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 right? I could talk about student writing because I teach writing. But if I was like, as a professor of writing, I can talk to you about, biology, then people would say, no, that doesn't really make sense, right? It has to line up with what you're doing. So also using the language of the discipline. So if there are vocabulary terms that other people know that are in your area of expertise, then that would show, you know what you're talking about because you know those vocabulary terms. This is just out in the real world. There's a reason why social media influencers get paid, and it's because they have followers, and that for some reason in our mind tells us that all these other people believe this person, so I must believe them too. I don't know if that's true or not. The last thing that I would say on this one is the formatting of your paper also establishes your credibility. So if your grammar and spelling is correct, if you've followed all the conventions of the style guide, which in English is MLA formatting. This is just because I've seen this a lot. I will just say this: if your font is all the same color and same size, like that all establishes your credibility as well. So pay attention to that kind of stuff. All right, now the last thing we'll end on here is logical fallacy. So these are ways that writers have tried to persuade their reader to do something that is faulty reasoning, and other reason, it's bad reasoning. It's not a good way to prove your point, right? And there's several of these that you see all the time. First one is bandwagon. Everybody's doing it. If all people have iPhones, is that really a good reason for you to have an iPhone? Not necessarily, right? Ad hominem is another one you see a lot in politics. So that's when you attack the person rather than the argument. Like, well, we should definitely do something about the environment, but those guys are just jerks, like that's not really a good argument. Slippery slope is one you see a lot in, I don't know, kind of as a, I don't know. I've seen this one a lot really too, and it tends to be in where there's really high emotions in topics, so abortion rights or gun rights or things like that. But one you might hear just kind of a silly example is when, sorry, I don't think I ever defined it. This is slippery slope is when you say some small action is going to inevitably lead to some like giant outcome, negative outcome, right? So this would be when someone says, oh, if I have that cookie, then I'll just keep eating cookies and I'm going to gain all this weight and I'll end up just like being hopelessly sad and losing my job and living in a van down by the river, right? That's probably not all going to happen because you had one cookie. So that would be an example of a slippery slope. So, yeah, those are all ways that do not persuade. The logical fallacies are not persuading your reader well. Those are not good reasoning. So, okay. If you have any questions, let me know. These are things you'll need to understand for your rhetorical analysis, so please reach out if you have questions.